On August 5, 2000, a Dutch tourist enjoying the first day of his vacation on the sun-drenched coast of Carcans, France, made a discovery that turned the idyllic beach into a scene of horror. Partially buried in the rolling dunes was the body of a young woman. Her name was Silja Trindler, an 18-year-old from Switzerland. She had been found 2 kilometers from the campsite where her family was staying. The cause of death was chillingly intimate and brutal. She had been held face down in the sand until she could no longer breathe. Under her fingernails, she carried the DNA of her killer, a ghost who had seemingly vanished into the vast summer crowds. Silja Andrea Trindler was born on April 16, 1982, in Affeltern am Albis, Switzerland. To outsiders, she grew up in the quiet, picturesque village of Rifferswil, a small community of just 600 people near Zurich. But beneath the tranquil surface of her life, a shadow hung over her childhood. Between the ages of 6 and 8, Silja was sexually assaulted by a neighbor. In a decision that would haunt their family for years, her parents chose to conceal the crime to avoid a scandal in their small village. The trauma of the abuse and the silence that followed shaped Silja into a reserved and melancholic young woman. She struggled to form relationships and often seemed lost in a private sadness. As she entered her teenage years, this buried pain curdled into resentment toward her parents. The household became a place of fierce arguments as they continued to insist on her silence. At one point, between the ages of 16 and 17, her inner turmoil led to her being committed to a psychiatric hospital. She was a young woman carrying an invisible, crushing weight long before she ever set foot on that French beach. In late July of 2000, the Trindler family embarked on a 5-day camping trip to Carcans, a beachside community on the coast of France. They had been there twice before, but this time, 18-year-old Silja did not want to go. The vacation, it was later said, was organized against her will. She shared a tent with her parents and her 13-year-old brother, but felt deeply isolated. Being from the German-speaking region of Switzerland, she couldn't communicate with the local French campers, deepening her sense of solitude. Soon, her unease morphed into something more sinister. On August 3rd, just 2 days before they were scheduled to return home, she was on a bike ride with her father when she made a chilling statement. "I'm happy to be with you because I feel spied on." Later that same day, after a trip to the beach, her composure shattered. She returned to the tent, furiously slammed a sand-filled water bottle to the ground, and screamed. When her father asked what was wrong, her reply was sharp and full of accusation. "You know what's wrong with me." The paranoia and distress escalated. The next morning, August 4th, she gave her father the silent treatment. After lunch, she was heard crying alone in the tent. That afternoon, she spent time with a group of students from Paris, but they later told police she was acting strangely and would cry to herself. The language barrier prevented them from understanding her turmoil. It was on the beach that she complained to them. "People are looking at me like I'm crazy." That evening, her anxiety reached a fever pitch. She confided in her younger brother that she'd seen 2 young Frenchmen shooting suggestive glances her way. She then insisted the family pack up immediately and drive back to Switzerland a full day ahead of schedule. Her vacation had transformed from an unwelcome obligation into a source of pure terror. By 6 p.m. on August 4th, Silja's frantic energy had found a new focus. She searched the family tent for the keys to the bicycle locker, but couldn't find them. Unable to take a bike, she made a fateful decision. She left the campsite on foot. The campsite's caretaker and his brother saw her go. An hour and 15 minutes later, at 7:15 p.m., a pair of German tourists saw her more than 2 kilometers away, on the dune line separating the town of Carcans from Lake Orton. They described her as looking dreamy, as she used a piece of wood to write something in the sand. This would be the last time anyone, other than her killer, saw Silja Trindler alive. She never returned to the campsite. At midnight, her parents, now sick with worry, alerted the night watchman. The local police weren't formally notified until 2 a.m. With her history of depression, her parents feared she may have taken her own life and told police she had been on antidepressants. A helicopter was called in, its searchlight scanning the dark, churning waves of the Atlantic. But Silja was not in the water. She was on the dunes. As dawn broke, the search intensified. 2 hours after the official search began, police made their first discovery at the foot of a dune. A pair of red Adidas sneakers, their laces neatly tied, pointing toward the ocean. Tucked inside one of them was a ring belonging to Silja. In front of the shoes sat a nearly empty bottle of mineral water. Nearby, Silja's father found a peculiar and poignant arrangement. 4 pine cones placed in a circle surrounding a single seagull feather stuck upright in the sand. He felt it was significant, as Silja had always loved seagulls. Then, at 1:30 in the afternoon, the Dutch tourist stumbled upon her body. She was lying on her back, partially buried in the sand. She was dressed in a black polo shirt, a brown skirt, and a red swimsuit top. In a final bizarre act of desecration, her killer had placed her swimming trunks over her face. Just a few meters away, investigators found the words she had been writing. The name Bob Marley was clearly visible. Next to it were the letters H.E. The wind had erased the rest. Police initially thought it might have been the start of the word H-E-L-P, but her mother offered a different, more cryptic interpretation. Hexe, the German word for witch. The autopsy confirmed the horrific nature of the crime. The official cause of death was suffocation from sand found deep in her airways. The medical examiner concluded that her face had been brutally forced into the dune until she stopped breathing. There were no other major injuries, but Silja had fought for her life. Under her fingernails, investigators found fragments of her attacker's skin, and with it, his DNA. It was a partial profile, but it belonged to an unidentified male. The coroner also found signs of recent sexual activity, which he believed may have been consensual due to a lack of violent injuries, along with a sperm sample mixed in the sand. The DNA was degraded, but it was a crucial piece of evidence. This genetic fingerprint should have been the key to solving the case. But Carcans in August was not a sleepy village. It was a global tourist hub. The local population of around 2,400 had swelled to over 40,000 people from Germany, the Netherlands, Belgium, the UK, and all over France. The suspect pool wasn't a pond, it was an ocean. The killer had left his DNA, but he had dissolved into a sea of strangers. The investigation began with a frustrating mix of strange leads and dead ends. The German tourists who last saw Silja alive reported seeing a young man carrying a bag emerge from the forest. He climbed the dune and stared at Silja for a long time, as if he were seeing her for the first time. Who was he? No one knew. Police looked into a local peeping Tom and someone who had been opening tents at night, but both were ruled out. The investigation was further complicated by a bizarre coincidence. Another young woman vacationing in Carcans looked remarkably like Silja, leading to a slew of mistaken sightings. In March 2001, a new witness came forward. A firefighter, who had been on vacation at the time of the murder, recalled seeing Silja on the evening of August 4th. He said she was with a slender, athletic young man of Creole or West Indian descent, with dyed blonde hair. A composite sketch of this man was created and distributed widely. This image led police to several individuals, including a Moroccan national, a surf shop owner, and a hotel cook, but DNA tests cleared them all. Then, a series of horrifyingly similar crimes offered glimmers of hope. In December 2001, Alain Diaz was arrested for the murder of a 10-year-old boy in Bordeaux. Diaz was known to vacation in Carcans, but his DNA was not a match. On August 6, 2003, on the island of Saint-Martin-de-Ré in the Charente-Maritime department, a 16-year-old girl named Audrey Texier had been helping her father, an oyster farmer, sell oysters at the local market. At 1 p.m. she left the market so she could go home and have lunch with her mother. She never returned. Audrey's mother grew worried when she didn't return and set out to look for her. Not long after, she found her daughter's half-naked body lying on the beach. She had been raped and asphyxiated with a cloth stuffed in her mouth. Both Audrey and Silja were teenage girls. They went missing after leaving their families. Both were murdered in small resort towns. Both had been suffocated, and both were raped. Or Silja had consensual sex if the medical examiner had a way to tell. Their bodies were both found on beaches, both had some clothing removed, and both died basically on the same day. The similarities were plain to see. Saint-Martin-de-Ré was also located only 160 kilometers from Carcans. Another unfortunate similarity it bore to Silja's case was how it seemed to be well on its way to going unsolved. The case remained unsolved until 24-year-old seasonal worker Frédéric Ramet was arrested on December 27th. Frédéric was one of the suspects initially looked into back in August, but nothing implicated him, so he was let go. But after the police found an unidentified fingerprint that had been overlooked and muddied, the investigation was reopened. This led police back to Frédéric, only this time with enough evidence to compel a DNA sample from him. The sample matched the DNA left behind when Audrey was raped. When the police in Carcans heard of Frédéric's arrest, they dispatched some of their own officers to Saint-Martin-de-Ré to compare his DNA to that found under Silja's nails. And the result was not a match. The case wasn't even a copycat killing. All the similarities to Silja's case were merely coincidence. Frédéric was handed down a sentence of 30 years imprisonment. With that, Silja's case went cold once again. Years passed. The man in the composite sketch, the so-called Creole man, was finally identified in 2011. He was a surfing enthusiast from the island of Réunion. He, too, was cleared. In 2012, the case was officially reopened and investigators took a new approach. They traveled to Silja's hometown of Rifferswil, Switzerland, to dig into the past she had tried to leave behind. For the first time, French police learned the full story of the sexual assault Silja had suffered as a child. They identified the man responsible, a local pharmacist, and tested his DNA. It was not a match. They uncovered other unsettling family secrets. Silja's mother was reportedly a member of a local sect and one of the guru's mistresses. There were also insidious rumors of incest involving Silja's father. To put the rumors to rest, both the guru and her father were tested. Neither was a match. The darkness in Silja's past, it seemed, was separate from the darkness that met her on that dune. The hunt for Silja's killer became one of the most extensive in French history. Over 20,000 people were questioned. More than 5,700 DNA tests were conducted. The DNA profile was run against databases in over 40 countries. In 2017, forensic technology had advanced enough to extract a complete DNA profile from the sperm sample found at the scene. It was a perfect genetic image of the killer. Still, there were no matches. He was a ghost, a man who seemingly committed a brutal murder, fought with his victim, left his DNA under her nails, and then vanished from the face of the earth, never to be arrested for another crime. In April 2023, the case, now heavy with 65,000 pages of procedural documents, was transferred to the Nanterre Cold Case Unit, a specialized team of investigators tasked with solving France's most stubborn mysteries. They are re-examining every clue, every witness statement, every dead end, hoping to find the one detail that was missed. Somewhere out there, a man carries the secret of what happened on the dunes of Carcans in August of 2000. He is now more than 20 years older, his youth faded. But his DNA remains unchanged, waiting in a database for a name to be attached.